In today's Farm Report, the labor disputes on the West Coast is starting to impact agriculture, especially when it comes to Asian markets. Cindy Zimmerman with AgriPulse has more.
The labor dispute at West Coast ports is really starting to hurt agriculture, with 29 ports up and down the West Coast impacted by the slowdown. American Farm Bureau trade specialist Dave Salmonson says the cost to agriculture is being estimated at more than $1.7 billion each month.
The impacts are losses of direct export sales of product that's not moving, extra costs for product farther inland trying to be diverted to other ports, some direct costs to producers of products not being exported, and it's lowering prices to farmers.
Salmonson says the impacts of the ports dispute are felt across the entire United States and may have long-term effects.
There's such an outlet to us for Asia, which has grown to be some of our biggest markets that we have. So this is critical for U.S. agriculture to get this situation resolved. We don't want to keep having our product just rotting on the docks waiting for a ship. Reputation as a reliable supplier to markets around the world suffers. People go elsewhere. They can get the product someplace else, they'll go elsewhere. And so you're going to have some long-term effects of trying to build that market back.
Farm Bureau economist John Anderson says the issue is starting to really hurt the meat industry, particularly pork.
We send a lot of pork to Pacific Rim countries, and slowdowns in shipments to those markets have started to be felt by the industry. You can get away with a slowdown for a while, but when cold storage starts to fill up and production is still coming along and needing a home, it gets to be a real problem. When you lose a customer, it takes a long time to get a customer back, and that's true whether you're selling beef or pork or tennis shoes or televisions or whatever you want to talk about. If we can't service our overseas customers because of these problems at the port, they'll go to somebody who will service them, and it'll take us a long time to get that business back. We don't want to lose market share at all, but the potential to really lose market share in that high-end market in Japan is something that I think is really critical to a lot of people in the industry, and that really is at risk because of this situation.
Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack was asked what USDA is doing about the situation during a House Agriculture Committee hearing last week.
We meet on a day-to-day basis, encouraging the sides to get this resolved. It's my understanding that there are just a couple of remaining issues. They're serious issues, but the hope is that these folks can get the last two issues resolved.
Reporting for AgriPulse, I'm Cindy Zimmerman.
Label GMO, we got a right to know it.
That music parody there was made by folks supporting one state's ballot initiative to make it mandatory for food labels to disclose if the food contains genetically modified ingredients. Some Senate and House lawmakers have just introduced a national bill to do that, the Genetically Engineered Food Right to Know Act.
The question then becomes, what is it that people do not have a right to know on the food label?
FDA Food Safety Director Michael Landa says current rules say you only have to disclose how the food was produced if it makes any difference to the food's final quality or safety. And he told lawmakers in 20 years of testing, they found no differences, no safety problems. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack says there's got to be a better way to inform consumers than mandatory labeling.
We are working with the Food and Drug Administration to sort of focus on new strategies and new ways to provide consumers appropriate information without basically sending a message that foods that are made with GMOs are in any way, shape, or form unsafe, because they're not.
A GMO labeling bill last year went nowhere in Congress. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Weather conditions, especially in winter, can affect the alfalfa crop. Dan Martins with the University of Minnesota Extension Service Office shares some insight on the current conditions that we've had.
I've had some discussions with people about how the winter weather might play out for alfalfa fields. First off, with the December thaw, a couple of callers wondered if it was an issue. I talked with U of M forage agronomist Craig Schaefer back in December. He said the thaw in December itself was not an issue. Young green shoots people saw then were most likely there earlier in the fall under the crop canopy or in stubble if the field was cut later in the fall. Any concern about the thaw would really be that a lot of snow melted away. Some of that water likely collected in low spots. There really wasn't a lot of frost in the ground at that point, and some of that water might have soaked away. If low spots iced over, that could be a problem. Where the snow melted away, the cold weather we had during January could have been challenging on some fields, particularly the fields with shorter stubble from late cuttings where there was little or no snow cover. Generally, if soil temperature around the crown drops below 15 degrees, there can be damage to the alfalfa crown. During the week from about January 4th to the 15th at Waseca, soil temperature at the 2-inch depth on 5 days reached minimum temperatures of 7 to 14 degrees. From February 12th to 17th, minimum temps at 2 inches were from 9 to 13 degrees. I believe the soil temperature gauge at Waseca is under bare soil, and that makes a difference. For example, in St. Paul on February 14th under bare soil, the minimum temperature at 2 inches was 15 degrees, while under sod it was 21 degrees. In Lamberton during January, the soil temperature at a 2-inch depth did not drop below 27 degrees. That makes me think they had some snow cover. In February on the 15th and 16th at the 2-inch depth, they got down to 19 degrees. At Morris during the cold days in January, minimum soil temperatures at 2-inch depth included 4 days that bottomed out at 9 degrees and then from 11 to 14. And then again at 10 and 9 degrees on February 2nd and 3rd. Lamberton and Morris soil temperature gauges are probably under bare soil conditions also. I don't think we can draw any conclusions about whether we'll have serious problems with alfalfa fields at this time. We've seen years with pretty good weather through the winter where we had alfalfa problems, and winters where weather looked risky through the winter and fields turned out pretty well. Weather during the transition from winter to spring can be a significant factor. Alfalfa fields with some old crop residue in the fall or with some snow cover offers significant insulation. Fields likely vary in how well carbohydrates were stored in root and crown structures. Many people would agree on concern for low spots in fields if water accumulated and iced over. Fields with short stubble and bare snow during severe cold weather could be watched more closely this spring. I think alfalfa growers are always ready to watch fields in the spring, and are prepared with Plan B in mind if they need to replace more alfalfa than planned. I'm Dan Martins with U of M Extension, and I hope you're doing well with the cooler weather again this week.